From Los Angeles, the home of film and television, this is Film Music Live, a webcast featuring outstanding composers, orchestrators, filmmakers, and more from the world of music for film, television, and video games, talking about their work and answering your questions. Film Music Live is sponsored by the Film Music Network and Film Music Institute. And now the host of Film Music Live, Daniel Schweiger.
Hey everyone, I'm Daniel Schweiger, and welcome to Film Music Live, the show where you get to ask the questions to today's top composers and the director this time. I'm happy to have you here. There has rarely been such a quiet scream on the cinematic radar than with 2021's excellent Pig, the story of a master chef turned into the sad champion of a culinary fight club in the quest for his best friend. Taking the cage in an impressive new direction was filmmaker and co-writer MICHAEL SARNOSKI, who teamed with composers ALEXIS GRAPSAS and Philip Klein for a haunting interior score that expressed volumes for a barely verbal character. Now, Sarnowski and Grapsas level up and shut up with that idea to creatively communicate for the sake of their lives with A Quiet Place Day One. It's a back to the beginning city-set prequel for the smash sci-fi horror franchise that now finds a woman trying to navigate a new monster-plagued reality that's rained down from the skies, killing anyone who dares to make a peep. As they put their own prequel stamp on the worlds created by filmmaker John Krasinski and composer Marco Beltrami, Sarnowski and Grapsas conjure a terrifying and emotional end of days where visual imagination and musical storytelling are the key to expression. As he matches Sarnowski's skillful direction, it's incumbent on Grapsas' scoring to tell us everything we need to know but can't say. Music that grips us with a legically thematic melody and breathless bursts of terror and suspense that play with the idea of sound. Music that throws us into a metropolis where silence equals life. It's a thrill ride of visual and musical storytelling that charts its own impressive path for two collaborators joined at the hushed hip. And now here to make some noise about their very big Hollywood step up back to the beginning of the Sound Monster apocalypse is A Quiet Place's Day One composer ALEXIS GRAPSAS and the director and co-writer MICHAEL SARNOSKI. Welcome to Film Music Live.
Hello. Hey,
thanks for having us.
Well, it's great to have you here. I and a lot of people are just such huge fans of Pig, which I think is just a brilliant movie and really one of Nicolas Cage's best performances.
Thanks.
And it really struck me, how similar the idea in Pig was, where you have a character who literally doesn't talk. And in a way, it kind of sets this up. What was it? First of all, how did you both meet and how did you discover the sound for Pig?
Well, we met on Pig. Do you want to cover cover the story of how we met? I mean, it's probably not that exciting. We met over.
It's not very exciting. Yeah, it was through an introduction of one of the producers on Pig, the movie, that pitched the script and the idea to me early on in the process, before Michael went into production. Her name is Dimitra Chingu, and she talked to me about this movie about Nicolas Cage losing his pig and trying to find it. And when I heard it, I was like, why would that be interesting to anybody? And it's one of these very simplistic things that, you don't really know what to do with it. And then I read the script and I fell in love with it. And I did a demo for Michael, I think with a lot of other composers in town, to be honest. And he responded to what I did. And, that's how we started working together. And actually, if I'm not mistaken, the sound that I did for that demo and the initial stuff that Michael ended up responding to is not too far off from what we ended up as the palette and the main sound in the film.
Yeah, that demo was a big part of it. Yeah, we had met. We sort of did the usual. You meet with a handful of people, talk to some people who are interested. But I don't know. I just remember talking on the phone with you and hearing that demo, and it just sort of seemed like the obvious choice, and I really responded to what you did with that. And I don't know, I think we have like a really nice just sort of way of communicating and understanding what we're each going for. And it was not the most exciting thing, but it was just one of those, you meet a collaborator and say, oh, this makes sense.
Yeah, and Michael is a terrible human being, so we ended up being very close friends after that.
Yeah.
I mean, Michael, what did you discover about visually getting across the idea of silence, of being silent in Pig as a director?
I mean, I guess I sort of knew Pig was a very silent story. I mean, we definitely talked about that. It's been a while since then, but yeah, I mean, Rob does not speak very much in that movie. I think there's a lot of like sort of moving through spaces and letting these kind of spaces and other characters do a lot of the talking and sort of showing a lot about the Rob character through them. So I think a lot of Pig was sort of like finding the right moment to sort of leave space for that stuff, and then finding the right moments to really kind of play into those, like, oh wait, there's something emotional going on under the surface, or there's something exciting going on here. And I think that sort of lent itself really well to Quiet Place as well.
I mean, A Quiet Place is a gigantic leap up. I mean, when they offered this to you, what was your reaction?
I mean, my initial reaction was sort of stunned, sort of like, really? I don't like, you guys really want, I mean, I kind of warned them. I remember when I signed on to the project, they sort of said like, hey, we want to do this like New York Day One invasion movie. What would your take on that be? And I told them like, you know, my take might not be the most marketable take. Like it's going to be something a little kind of offbeat, emotional. And that's the thing that I'm going to need to kind of be fascinated by this. And, you know, the studio and John Krasinski said like, yeah, let's do that. But yeah, I mean, initially it was a little bit like, hey, I don't know if this is the kind of movie that you want me on, but if you do, like, here's what I would do. And I'm excited to do that version of this. So it's been cool to actually get to like follow through with that.
And what was it like to get this movie after Pig, Alexis?
Well, I had no doubt because I've worked with Michael before, and we have a shorthand, and we had his similar sensibilities about stuff. So I had no doubt about what Michael is going for and what he's going to need. Our biggest struggle and fight at some point is how we can bring that into a blockbuster and a more commercial world where expectations sometimes are different. But I remember from the very beginning when I read the script, when Michael sent me the script, which was over 2 years ago now, I would say, I found this very linear story and a lot of similarities in the characters of about, there's just one thing that's very simple and very important to them. And it's the simplest thing in the world. It's like, oh, finding my pig or getting pizza while the world is ending around me. And there was this parallel, similar story that I really connected to, and it was the most important thing for me. So no matter what goes around and what characters we will meet in the way, and I don't know how Michael feels about that and if it was intentional or if it was something that naturally came out to him, but I could definitely see his writing in that, and I kind of knew where he wanted that to go. So it was for me, it was a no-brainer. Let's just go there together, and we'll be in this until the end.
I think with the sequel to a hugely popular film, or in this case the second film, everyone, they kind of want the same thing, but they want something different. How, as a director and the composer, how did you want to kind of retain the element of what made these films successful, but yet put your stamp on it so that this isn't some completely different left field thing?
Yeah, I mean, from a storytelling, like directorial standpoint, I mean, I think I knew the world itself was going to have enough of those elements. I mean, this, that core, like day one New York City idea, I think everyone can kind of wrap their head around the sorts of things that would come with that. And so we kind of had to do justice to some of those, but mostly I just knew that I needed to focus on character and I needed to focus on kind of Sam's journey, and then just kind of let the world be the world. It's going to be the Quiet Place world, but I didn't really want it to feel tonally like the other movies. I mean, inevitably there are going to be things, these breathless moments and things like that will have a kind of commonality with the early ones. But mostly I just sort of knew that, the monsters and the reality of this world would do the heavy lifting for the shared lore of these things. And it was my job to just find a new character story within that world and just focus on that.
What do you think, Alexis?
Sorry, I missed your question.
Oh, how did you want to retain the elements of, maybe what Marco did?
Oh, yeah. No, I mean, we talked about that a lot intensively, and it was a very important discussion in the beginning that we don't want to go back to that. I respect Marco so much, and I am actually, friends with some people from his camp, and he's an incredible composer. So I didn't want to go and do anything similar to that. And creatively, we did have the freedom to do that because we are starting over. It's day one. We don't need to follow the story of that family in the woods anymore. This is completely new characters, a completely new script. So me and Michael both in the beginning felt like, we want to do our own thing here, and we're going to have different themes. It's a different character. It's a different story. And that was one of the first things that I also felt like I needed to find as a sound with Michael. And what is Sam's theme, our main character's theme? And if we focus the story around that, everything else is going to fall in place.
Yeah, I mean, for me, the most interesting thing about the movie is that, the character is not going to make it in a world with monsters or without. Her time is limited. So usually in these kind of movies, it's all about the quest to survive, to live. And in this case, it's the quest to get a pizza, but knowing that this is just not going to have a happy ending.
Yeah, I mean, that was kind of the core idea. After initially being approached for this, it was, I think, especially with a big city invasion movie, we've seen versions of this before. We've seen disaster movies. We've seen, the Cloverfields and the Godzillas and all sorts of things like that. And one of the special things about the first Quiet Place was that it takes place well into the apocalypse. They kind of avoid needing to go down the tropes of that genre because they're kind of deep into it already. So I kind of decided on Sam's character because I was trying to avoid, like, okay, I don't want some movie about bunch of soldiers fighting monsters. I don't want sort of the classic, like, oh, I have to like rescue my girlfriend and escape the city kind of thing. So I tried to just think even like, well, I mean, at its core, a lot of these movies are about survival. Like, what would happen if we just took that out from under us and it wasn't even, you were following a character that wasn't even really in the long term trying to survive, which is putting yourself in a pretty like tricky, dramatic spot, because that's where a lot of these movies get their tension and their push. But I was like, well, if we're going to tread through this kind of territory that we've seen stuff like this before, let's go for sort of a radical shift in that. And so that's where kind of following a hospice patient who does not have long for this world anyways came from. And then from there, a lot of the rest of the story kind of unfolds from that. Like, what sorts of things would she prioritize in this world? And I think that's why we really had to start with Sam's theme. I mean, and that's kind of how we approached Pig. It was finding sort of a theme, and a lot of that was also focused on like finding the specific instrument that had the specific sound for that theme, and then kind of building out from there. Like, I mean, I think, yeah, Sam's theme was the first thing that you found, Alexis, and then a lot of the other stuff kind of starts shaping around that. And so, yeah, like the first time you hear her theme is when she's putting on a pain patch in hospice, and that's sort of says a lot that like this is our main character here. This is when you're going to hear the theme of this character in this movie, and it kind of carries through throughout.
Yeah, to follow up on what Michael said in your question, Daniel, before I get into any, thematic or musical stuff, I think the one brilliant thing that Michael did, and in the beginning I wasn't even sure how, we're going to put this into the blockbuster world, is that you put a terminally ill patient into a post-apocalyptic movie. For me, just as an idea, and you're changing the rules of these movies and the monster movies, and the survival just means something completely different anymore, because it's not about staying alive, it's about something else. And you still see this connection with the stranger, which again goes back to his previous movie, which we see these two people who just meet throughout their journey without having a relationship before. And there was just something so fragile about her. It's this character that, like you said, it's not going to make it. So the first thing that came to mind to me when I was reading the script, I don't know why, I can't explain why, but I called Michael about it when I read it, and I said, there's something about her sound that I'm hearing that needs to have woodwinds. It was just this very breathy and warm thing that I was feeling that I needed to surround her with, no matter what goes around. That I just instantly responded to that. And then Michael said, I have thought about the exact same thing. And we hadn't even had a conversation about that before. So it's one of these things that's just, I don't know, works out. And when you work with somebody before, you develop these instincts that somehow just fall in place.
Now, I've got a question from Aaron Cruz. Hey, guys, did the lack of dialogue in A Quiet Place Day One make this project feel similar to scoring a silent film? Also, I love the cue in the jazz club. It brought a tear to my eye.
That's a beautiful cue. Alexis, you did an amazing job with that one. Did this feel? I mean, I've never personally scored a silent film before, so I don't know. Alexis, have you? Is this the quietest film you've scored?
No, not even as a like student project or something. So I don't think we can even go there because sound is so important in this movie, right? Silent movies, don't even have sound. But go ahead, Michael. I don't know how you want to.
I mean, definitely. I mean, yeah, I don't know what it would be like to sort of score a true silent film, but yeah, there is not a lot of dialogue in this, and so we did have to think a lot about the balance between music and sound effects, and so certainly like silence was playing a big role, but I mean that's kind of true. I mean you're always thinking about that balance of like where should there be music, where should you let sound play its role, but certainly on this one that was at the front of mind. But I think that's something you're kind of always dealing with, whether you have 5 minutes of dialogue or 50 minutes of dialogue. So I don't know. It weirdly didn't feel that different from scoring anything else. It was just, we're thinking about character, we're thinking about what we're trying to say, we're thinking about where having music or not having music how it would affect what we want the audience to feel. So it's I don't know, it didn't feel like some drastically different creative exercise to me.
Yeah, the only thing I would like to add that might be different than other movies that have more dialogue is that on the music side, you have to do a little bit more of the storytelling. You have to carry a little bit more and explain, quote unquote, why things are happening. So, the scene that you described in the jazz club, which is one of my favorite scenes in the movie, how it works with the visuals. It would be amazing at some point if you saw this scene without music, or if you see it with different music, what different emotions would come out and what it would make you feel. So it's one of these things where you have to follow along with the characters and help the pace and the story progress, just because again, like we don't have a lot of dialogue. And this is one of the movies where, for example, we see her happy and we see her smile probably in the first time in the movie. So that is a very important thing that has to come out in the music and has to be part of the storytelling.
Now we've got a question from Ivan Sorkin at the Bond Music, and I'll make this for both of you. What was the most unusual, difficult, or interesting thing for you while working on A Quiet Place Day One?
You go first, Alexis.
Go. Sure, I'll go first this time. The most difficult or unusual thing. I would say that the most difficult challenge I had musically after all of my conversations with Michael was to, keep the emotional core of the movie intact. And, in studio films, a lot of the time, people focus on the explosions and the action scenes and the tensions and the monsters and the scares. And I kind of didn't worry about that in the beginning. I kind of knew that's gonna happen eventually. My main focus and my main challenge is, who are these two characters? Who are these two people? And how can I help you care about them? Because if you don't care about them, you don't care what happens at the end. You don't want to follow the journey. And one of the biggest challenges I found in that musically is how to bring a little bit of hope and a little bit of light into the music. And you'll notice that a lot of the thematic material sometimes have that sense of hope. Because I always felt like we need to have a little bit of, of that in the story, and you need to allow some light to come through all of this darkness that's going on around you, and the world is ending. And I had to find that fine balance that would still make you feel like we are in the post-apocalyptic movie and the end of the world, but also, these people are there, and makes you feel something at the end.
Yeah, I mean, I would say probably something similar, that it was striking that balance between, in some ways we're making a big studio movie that has to be tense and exciting, but at the same time, we're also making a really quiet, intimate, sort of unusual character story. And figuring out when to play each of those, how to transition between those, musically, editorially, all sorts of things was that was probably the hardest thing to really land and to fine tune, because it's just a very fine balance where you need to do justice to both of those. If one is too heavy hand, like if it's too action and too driven, the intimate stuff just isn't really going to play. So just finding that kind of perfect balance was a really was a tricky exercise.
Now, I've got a question from Esteban for you, Alexis. Do you use any free plugins, and what are your favorites?
I'm probably gonna disappoint my friend Esteban a little bit with my answer, because I don't really care about plugins or softwares or stuff that much. I just focus on what it sounds like, and usually what I do, I end up experimenting a lot with musicians and live players, and I just get into the studio with them, and we try themes and ideas, and it's all about finding this character sound that comes from an audio source, much more than plugins and softwares. And I'm not the best person to answer that stuff. I'm not really a tech nerd when it comes to software.
One thing that hit me right off the bat, I really loved how you kind of gave a nice slow build up to the shit hitting the fan in the film. And this really struck me, again, with all props to Marco's film, which really gets under your skin. I think this is a much more melodic score, and just in general, although the monster stuff is definitely there. And I just love this just really beautifully melodic, opening. I mean, I guess that's kind of part of the plan to disarm you as to what is coming up.
I mean, you need a good story for that to happen, and you need the right film for that to happen. And if Michael had a film that the characters or the story wouldn't allow that, I would not force it. For me, that was there, and I felt like I had that palette, and I wanted to start in a very small and contained place, like we talked about earlier, which was Sam's world. And it's this patient that almost doesn't leave the hospice center in the beginning, and we always want to be there with her. So I have this woodwind group surrounding her, and a very, subtle melody on top with a custom-made violin. And then when we go into the city, and when she decides to get out of that comfort zone, which is a big deal to her, we have to feel like things are opening up. So a lot of the times you will see this small sound opening up and be taken over by the orchestra. It happens again, when they have the conversation in the church, and then we move on and we see New York, and we go to Patsy's, and she sees the pizzeria. So it was all about this balance of we have these themes, but when is it time for us to get really small and intimate and be right there with her, and we get out of the environment and out of New York, and we're maybe there with her and the cat and her world, and when it's time to just comment on what's going on around us and give a little bit of that openness of the image and the scope that the movie is providing. And the main melodic ideas in the movie, other than Sam's theme, is the monster theme, obviously, which is very prominent. And Michael always wanted that to have a feel of it's there and we feel it, even though we don't see the monsters, which is a big theme in the movie. We don't always see the threat; it's just out there, and a lot of variations, even in the action sequences and the big stuff, they have a hint of the monster theme in there. And our third theme is the friendship theme between the two, which plays in a variety of ways, and it fully develops in the finale of the movie when she helps him get away.
Were you in for the kind of ringer of all this melody in the film before you get to the monster stuff, or? No, I mean for you, Michael. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay.
What was the question?
Oh, were you the kind of subversion of just playing all this really lovely melodic music. I mean, how for you did that help you set up the beginning of the film?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't even just think of it as the beginning. Like, certainly, before the sort of attack happens, yeah, we're not playing this as like horror music, and yeah, it is this very melodic, emotional stuff. Although then, once the attack happens, there's a while where we have, we're leaning more into some of this, desolate, monstery, darker stuff. But like that melodic stuff creeps back, and by the end, that is the identity of the film again. It's not like we sort of do the light emotional stuff, then swap it out for the scary stuff for the rest of the movie. Like it keeps kind of like weaving in and out. And the ending music like very much is fully back into that kind of melodic emotional space. So it, I was just about finding the right moments to do it. And sometimes we found like there's a moment where after one of our biggest action scenes, when there's this big kind of crowd massacre and Sam almost dies, and we end that by returning to like a kind of simplified version of her theme again, and that's the kind of stuff where like even when you think you could lean into something more actiony or more bleak or dark, like coming back to that character thing can kind of belong both in those really quiet little moments or be put into some of those big moments to remind you that we're just watching a sick, dying character trying to get through the end of the world.
Okay, I'll have to give props to Michael for that because maybe he doesn't remember. But first of all, he's a director who likes themes, which is not, always the case. So he really does respond that, and he wants that connection into the story. And sometimes he'll throw these super crazy ideas at me, which my first reaction is like, how do I even approach that? Or how do I do that? What is he talking about? So back to the magic trick, for example, that we were talking before. Michael said, we have these two characters who, circumstances brought them together because of what's going on out there. So what if we do something with the monster theme for this scene? And I said, that's not going to work. The monster theme is dark and it's the monster theme. Why would we put that in an emotional, sentimental scene? And then, I took a day or two and thought about it. And then I started playing a variation that's reversed and whatnot, whatever, on a very emotional way, and led me to something that I would have never done just because of, an idea or something that he's going to throw out there at you, which, in the beginning, he'll admit and he'll say it himself, like, I know this sounds crazy, but what if we try this? And then it's at the end, it kind of works. And he knows the story better than I do, obviously. So there's a reason why he's throwing that idea out there, and why he thinks that could be relevant or that thematic material could be brought back in a moment that you would have never thought of.
So, it's Quiet Place, day one, and we still don't know what the hell these monsters are. Now, for you as a director and you as a composer, do you have an origin in your head that helps you in terms of creating them, visualizing them, and scoring them?
That's all.
I mean, yeah, I do have, I have, there's more in my head about these monsters than is on screen, but that's also kind of what I like about these monsters. I like that in the first movies, they're not getting into, there's no scene where a scientist is like dissecting the monster, being like, my God, we've figured out that they're actually bred from blah, blah, blah. Like, it's just like that. Like, what makes these monsters kind of relatable is that kind of primal, essential thing of if you make a sound, you die, and there's something that's going to come out of the shadows and get you. And I think the more you start explaining, like, they come from a planet in this galaxy, like it just starts sort of taking away from that essential nature of them. So, we tried to like expand the lore a little bit and hint at certain things, but these movies just really aren't about that for me. Like I thought the first one, I mean, especially was at its core, it was a sort of an unusual family drama exploring some dark stuff of like guilt and forgiveness. And then it just happened to take place in this post-apocalyptic world with these monsters, and they just sort of like heighten that tension and make you like lean in more so that you're there for the scary stuff, but you're also there for the emotional stuff. So yeah, I had lots of theories on how these monsters work, and I talked with John Krasinski a bit about that. But I think both of us, like Krasinski as well, sort of liked this idea that this is out there, so it's not really spoilers, but he had always said, yeah, they like came from another planet. that got destroyed, and they were sort of cast out through the cosmos as meteorites, and then they happened to kind of wash by Earth, and a lot of them landed here. And there's something just kind of basic about that they're just this apex predator that from another world operated in one way, but here they are top of the food chain, and that's no fun for us. And I don't know, part of me doesn't need much more than that.
But it'd be you, Ali. Alexis, did you kind of try to figure out on your own what these things were in order to score them?
Not really. I mean, story-wise and all that, origin-wise, I know some, things were there before. I leaned to Michael for all of that stuff. The musically, the things I can talk about is when I was trying to figure out a monster theme, I was trying to think of something like very growly and almost like slow moving, because it feels like, even though these monsters tend to have like this ability to move very fast, it's all about this slow pace of how they would follow you when they're trying to figure out where you are, and they're trying to figure out, where the sound is coming from. So that was one of the things that kind of interested me in the beginning, to figure out something like very slow moving behind you that's a bit terrifying. And the other thing that I had to technically also figure out is, how to build the music around the world that sometimes needed to be silent. Because I would be asked, for example, sometimes to provide music in a scene that needed some tension, but at the same time, you have to feel that the character is still and making no sound, so like the monsters don't hear them. So I would have to choose kind of like where to be in the sonic spectrum, and sometimes I would be, very high or very low, and leave all this space in the middle for the monster sounds to come out, or the silence to do its thing. So it was mostly musical challenges like that I had to deal with and keep in mind when I was writing.
Now, we've got a question from Dale for you, Alexis. What is the baritone violin credited in your Pig score, and can you share any details about the other unusual bowed instrument sounds in Pig? What a great movie, Cage is King.
Sure. I don't know, Michael, do you want us to give away some of our secrets or not?
I mean, that I don't mind. That's your call if you want to use them later. I mean,
baritone
give away half of them.
Yes, okay.
You don't have to give all of them away.
Without getting too technical, it's basically a regular sized violin that just has different strings. So it's thicker strings, and they are tuned an octave below. It is a sound that I somehow brought back in this movie. It's played the exact same way, but it's very difficult to tune, and it has this more raw and non-classical sound to it that has the emotion and the feeling that I was going for. And then the other question about the other bowed instruments in Pig, there's quite a few. I think the most characteristic one that we found with Michael while we were experimenting with stuff together was the high-pitched sound that you hear is a cavaquinho instrument, which is it's a traditional Brazilian instrument, but instead of playing it the way you would play it, we started bowing it. So it feels like bowing a very small cello, and it provides this very folky, bright sound that was able to come through the rest of the mix and the rest of the stuff, and was given this juxtaposition between the dark sound of the baritone violin, which some people call it octave violin or whatever, and the high bright stuff of the bowed cavaquinho. And again, to me, this was a musical representation of the balance between the darkness and the light that Pig was all about again. And I found a different way to do it in this movie, but I'm always trying to find these links in the story and in the script to see how kind of represent that musically. And that was a sound that when we were in the studio and playing, Michael, I remember he just heard it and said, that's it, that's it right there. He was in the studio with a musician when we were recording and bowing weird stuff and experimenting.
Oh, Michael, a casting question for you. You know, it took me quite a while to realize that was Eddie from Stranger Things, and he is just great. I mean, were you like one of these guys watching Stranger Things, and I'm like, wow, who is this guy? I gotta have him. And Alexis, how did you want to score this character?
Yeah, I mean, for Joe Quinn, I mean, he's obviously incredibly talented. Yeah, I remember meeting with him. He auditioned for the role and just kind of blew me away. I mean, I think some of it just comes from the kind of person that he is. He's both, like, I think he can play this character that's almost like boyish at times, but also has this like deep emotion and almost wisdom to him. And I think a lot of that just comes from him. Like he's just a very thoughtful, intelligent, kind person, and I think that comes across in his characters. And yeah, I loved working with him, and he did an amazing job, and he was great on Stranger Things. Yeah, I you know, casting's always kind of, you write a character. I never really write characters for specific actors. I always kind of I almost try intentionally to avoid thinking about who could play the character, so that I'm making sure that they kind of like are full on the page, and everything that they need is there. And then it's about finding an actor that can do that, but then will also, like, you know, bring a whole new world of emotion to it. And he definitely did that.
How did you want to play his character, Alexis? Because usually when you see a guy like this in the post-apocalypse, they're usually jackasses who do not come to good ends. But in this, you actually really end up kind of growing to love this tagger-on guy. How did you want to, again, fill in that character musically?
Yeah, it took me a while to approach that. And obviously, I think the first thing that you want to do and comes to mind is that, okay, we have two main characters. We're going to have a theme for Samira. We're going to have a theme for him, right? And after a while, I saw that I wanted to get away from that idea. You know, one thing that Joe did is that his acting was incredible. So there was never a moment or you know, a scene where I had to help or fix something, or like, oh, you know, this didn't really come through the way we wanted to, let's help it with the theme or music. Or, you know, it's this very fragile person that again finds himself in New York City for a variety of reasons. And to me, the approach was more about the relationship with Sam. So instead of having a theme about Eric, it felt to me more appropriate to have a theme about them and their friendship and why these two strangers stick together. And it had to be something very simple and stoic. And, you know, another similarity that I could go back to Michael about with his previous movies, that there is no romance in this movie. There's no easy ways out of like, oh, let's have somebody that survives at the end or save the day, or, you know, love story, or save my girlfriend, or like, this is a friendship, a true friendship with no romance between two strangers. So I had to kind of score that and score that in a way that's very stoic and very simple and almost stays out of the way and helps you understand the connection, the relationship between these two people.
Now, of course, you know, Michael, you've gone from one scene-stealing animal to another scene-stealing animal. I don't know who's smarter, a pig or a cat, but man, this cat just completely steals the film. How was it working with the cat and what you could get out of the cat? And Alexis, how difficult was it scoring the cat?
So working with the cat, I don't know if I would say the pig or the cat was harder to work with. It helped that the cat was trained. In pig, we couldn't afford a trained pig, so we just had a farm pig, and that, you know, that makes it tricky. The cat, you know, it's both hard, but you're also surrounded by extremely talented animal trainers who have been working with these cats for like months before we start shooting. So, you know, it's manageable, but you also kind of get to know the animals and get to know what they can and can't do, how they respond. You tailor the set so that they're, you know, they're not going to be startled. They kind of feel comfortable. The actors worked really hard to get to know the cats. And I mean, originally Lupita was really terrified of cats, and she forced herself to like become really good buddies with these cats so that they knew when they were being carried by her, they were safe and everything was chill. So, you know, there's a lot of considerations, especially when we really didn't want to do any CG cats, and we thankfully didn't have to. So, you know, it's a ton to deal with, but we made it work, and I loved it. Like it's really fun. It adds kind of another element to the day that, yes, can sometimes be tricky and a headache, but sometimes the best elements in movies are that. So yeah, I love working with animals.
Alexis, how is it to score? Because obviously you're kind of putting emotion into maybe a word ain't actually there. How tricky was it to score the cat?
Yeah, I don't really have much to add to this. I mean, I never really scored the cat. I stayed out of the way. There was a scene in the movie that was very difficult, and you would never know. It's one of the simplest cues or things that happens in the movie. It's when basically we get introduced to Eric, Joe's character, which, you know, Frodo the cat goes and kind of like meets him, and then is the connection between the two and how they meet. And he brings Sam and Eric together. So that was a very, very tricky scene. You know, I didn't have to score the cat. I just had to score the moment. And the trickiness is because you come out of this like massive action sequence. It's very dark. People have died. And you have to switch gears and go into something that's an introduction of a new character and something that you don't want it to feel dark. So I wrote that scene more times than I wanted to, but at the end, I think we landed on something that is the absolute right one. And you know, when there were emotional moments with the cat, like for example, at the end of the movie, a very emotional scene for me that Michael, again, he does it in a scene of tension with monsters around, but you see Samira handing off the cat to Eric before she runs away. That is a very emotional scene, and I don't score the cat, I score Samira. So we play in Samira's scene there. It was always about her and what the cat means to her.
Yeah, and that scene where we first meet Eric and Frodo sees him, that was that was a really tricky one to hit, but that kind of goes into that same kind of sense of balance and finding that perfect kind of simple friendship theme, because yeah, it's like how do you shift gears like that while not making it feel silly, while still making it feel like it's part of the same world, but there is like a sweetness to where some of this goes, especially when Eric comes. There's a sweetness, there's like a little bit of humor, but you don't want to make it feel like it's from a different film. And so yeah, Alexis handling that and like just hitting that perfect like note was beautiful. Because yeah, I mean, if you go too far in one direction or the other, like if it's too light, it sort of becomes goofy, or like it feels like it's from a different movie. If you go too dark, then it becomes like creepy, and it almost feels like you're saying Eric's like threatening or creepy, and since he's following her around, it could easily lean into that. So that was like really walking a knife's edge, and Alexis pulled that off amazingly.
Watch movies like this now, it obviously it almost seems like everything is a metaphor for the pandemic. I mean, were there any difficulties? I mean, I guess this was shot maybe when they had the vaccine. I mean, were there any difficulties scoring it because of that, or was that even on your mind, especially shooting these incredible crowd scenes in the film?
We were like just in this sort of perfect moment after things had settled down. I mean, we shot at beginning of 2023. So it's time has just kind of gone out the window. But so Alexis, did you have COVID issues
when you were shooting?
Yeah. So we had we were kind of more or less in the clear. Like there were still like precautions you had to take on set and stuff, but it didn't really get in the way too much, I don't think, in my memory. Did it for you?
Yeah, no, I didn't have any issues either. I actually scored this at the very end of the process. The movie was evolving and changing a lot, and we were rediscovering things. We were trying to take it into different directions. So I actually ended up scoring this in London in May, less than 2 months ago. It was in the beginning of May, and yeah, it was a kind of like a last minute push.
And again, estimates back for you, Alexis. He'd like to know, what DAW do you use and why, or do you write on paper?
Can I ask what a DAW is, just so I know what everyone's talking about?
Why don't you answer that?
What is a DAW?
It is the software that I use to sequence and writing. It's just a fancy word for the writing software. And I am on Pro Tools. I write and I sequence everything on Pro Tools, which makes things easy for me to communicate with music editors, do conforms, record, send sessions to musicians, bring it back. It's not the best for MIDI, but it's what I use and what I'm stuck with for the moment.
Now, Asante Ranger Danny at Save the Power Rangers would like to know from both of you, who are your favorite film score composers?
I'm sure I'm much more basic than Alexis is, so I'll just throw. I listen to a lot of Ennio Morricone, but that's pretty cliche. So Alexis, you come in with the more artistic answer.
No, it's I love Ennio, and I am actually really terrible with lists and naming favorite people. I don't know. I mean, if I had to go back, I'm a big Bernard Herrmann lover. But one of the people that are still working today, and I, respect a lot, a couple of the people actually, I'm going to throw some names out there. Thomas Newman is one of the, guys that really inspired me and will make me wanted to get into this business. And there's a couple of incredible composers out there right now who are fresh and new and have a voice. And I don't know, Nicolas Brichel is one of them. I really look up to him and his stuff, and I'm always interested to what he has going on. Ludwig Göransson is another. I loved Johann's stuff a lot before he passed. There is just so many to name and tell, but just a few names that come to mind right now.
I hear this ALEXiS GRAPSAS guy is pretty good too.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I don't know if you've heard, he doesn't have a Wikipedia page, so he's.
Do you not have a Wikipedia page? Someone make him a Wikipedia
Didn't
page.
you see that article that came up? It's like, who is this guy? He doesn't have a Wikipedia page. How does he score a movie like that? And it became a joke. And I have it between my friends now. It's so fun. It's like a relatively unknown composer scores quiet plays he doesn't even have a Wikipedia page. So, yeah, it's
not unknown to me.
Yeah.
What's next for you both?
Figuring stuff out. I'm in the early phases of getting ready for my next project called The Death of Robin Hood, but very, very sort of early figuring out where we're going to shoot it, all that kind of stuff. So there's not a ton to say on that one yet.
What about you, Alexis? What's up ahead for you?
Yeah, the next thing I have coming up, it's starting towards the end of the summer, and it's a mini series, a new show I'm very excited about. It's mostly all produced in the UK, and it's from Amazon. I can't still say too much about that, but it's going to keep me quite busy for most of the fall. And yeah, obviously I'm always starting early. Whenever Michael is working on something, I always get the scripts early, and I'm working on him and ideas and whatnot. But nothing more than that I can share with at the moment.
So to wrap it up, I mean, again, a huge congratulations to both of you with, the reviews that this has gotten. It's done great at the box office this weekend. I mean, I think we're going to be in this universe for quite a few movies from now. If you got the chance to do this again, would you want to jump into the future, continue with the people on the boat? I mean, where would you like to go in this universe, both of you?
I don't know. I mean, this was a story that I really cared about. I really had to focus on that character of Sam and the character of Eric and find this story. So it's hard when people ask me, what other story do you want to tell in The Quiet Place? It's like, I don't know. I spent 2.5 years telling this one and trying to do it justice. So I would need some time to really reflect and see what would I want to focus on. But I mean, I think the universe, it offers a nice thing of that. It's so essential that if you can find a character story somewhere in the world that is unique, you can tell it in this universe. So, I'm sure there are plenty of other ideas, but right now I'm spent.
Alexis, if someone threw another one at you, where would you want to?
Yeah, I agree with Michael. I mean, it's a story that you can just keep going and going. You can take it in any country in the world and say, oh, what about if the monsters came here? And to me, it stops being interesting after a while, unless you have a character in a story. So if there's something for me there that I find interesting and I can connect to, and it has to be placed and put into that world, sure. But the franchise and the story alone just to be in a place where you have to be quiet. I think it has been explored in a very cool way with all of these 3 movies. So it has to be something that connects you to and something more specific and something emotionally deeper than that.
Well, I can't wait to see wherever we might end up in the Quiet Place universe. Alexis and Michael, thank you so much for joining us at Film Music Live. I want you all to go see A Quiet Place Day 1 in theaters with Alexis' score available on Milan Records. Thanks to our show producer, Dale Turner, executive producer, Mark Northam, and graphic designer, Mark Banning. And tune in to the next Film Music Live on July 15th as Michael Abels becomes the Acolyte. I'll see y'all then.
Thanks for having us.
So much. This was great.